All right, recording has started, and uh,
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
screen one, go live. Okay, how's everybody doing today?
Done good.
Pretty good.
Good.
Okay, cool. I've got a ton of slides to go through today. I've got a lot to say, and so I'm going to ask you to please hold your comments and questions until the end, because it is going to take me. I've got like 35 slides here. All right, let's go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Ultra Engine 0.9.5. This is available right now on the beta branch on Steam and on the standalone right now. You can access this right now. This was released like Thursday, I think. And this is a big update. This is what I've been working on for the last month, and that's why we didn't have like really any updates in the last few weeks, and but now it's here, and now we're gonna resume the rapid update schedule. So the goals for this update were to provide compatibility with AMD cards, which we were having problems with previously, add support for multi-sample anti-aliasing, and overall improved stability. And I decided that the best way to achieve this was with an OpenGL 4.6 rendering backend. The advantages that this provides are, once again, rapid development. This is a big one. OpenGL has proven to be more reliable. OpenGL actually has a lot of important features that we've been missing from Vulkan. The system requirements are lower, even though it's rendering the exact same thing. And as I showed last week, we actually got a significant improvement in performance simply by switching to OpenGL. And I'll talk about that in quite a lot of detail. I didn't tell you last week that it was OpenGL, but that's why it was 2.5 times faster. So the last time I actually worked with OpenGL was with Leadworks using version 4.0. And what's changed since then? It's like 4.6 is quite a bit different from what I was used to. So I did have some new things to learn. I was able to replace our entire rendering backend in like 5 weeks, which is a testament to the rapid development that this allows. That's like 2 years worth of Vulkan work. But what's new in 4.6 is direct state access is a big one. This is very cool. Bindless textures. Bindless textures, I'd say, are the most important advancement in real-time rendering in the last decade. These are very important, and they don't get the recognition they deserve. Sparse textures are supported. I haven't worked with it yet, but these are, I think these are good for large-scale virtual texturing, like for geospatial mapping. Spire V is actually supported in OpenGL 4.6. Indirect draw mesh shaders are actually supported through an extension in OpenGL. Pipeline statistics, so we can get more detailed stats on exactly what the shader is doing. I haven't looked at these yet, but I think that's going to be very interesting to me. We have the ability to disable error checking, which we do by default in the release build. That makes performance a little bit faster, maybe, theoretically. Probably not, but I do it anyways. And then also parallel shader compiling, which I haven't gotten into that. Direct state access is it's just a nicer way to write code. Instead of binding a lot of things, we just use, so the old way is we bind the read frame buffer, we bind the draw frame buffer, and then we blip the frame buffer, and it just uses those two global states. The direct state access way is to just call this one command between the source and the destination. This is how it should have always been from the start, but I mean, I don't think this is any faster. I think it's just more convenient. It's just nicer to work with because any modern driver is going to automatically, like it's not going to bind. It's not going to perform if that binding step is slow. It's not going to perform that until the first command is actually called that uses it. So I don't think it's a performance thing. I think it's just a nice cleanup of the API, and I like it. Okay, so until now we've been working exclusively with Vulkan, and as we've seen, there's a lot of problems with it. The number one issue is the development time is extremely slow, and this isn't boilerplate that you do once and then forget about it. This affects every aspect of graphics development, and it just creates a permanent slowdown on everything. In fact, everything that we want in version 1.0 would have been finished 2 years ago if I had just stuck with OpenGL. It's a very, like, I can't overstate how slow things are with Vulkan. And then, once we got to release, what we've seen is Vulkan is unreliable. It is. We've seen things with Vulkan, not just in our software, but in other companies' software that we never saw with DirectX, we never saw with OpenGL, and I'll talk more about that in detail. Vulkan is missing some important features. The system requirements for Vulkan are higher to do, even though it's doing the exact same thing. And as we've seen in our situation, Vulkan delivers slow performance. I got a free 250% speed up in our renderer just by using OpenGL, and I'll talk about that too. So Vulkan development is slow. This is all the code that you need. Actually, you need more than this, because this transition image layout, that's another 50 lines of code. This is all it takes to do one command in OpenGL. And the idea that you're going to compartmentalize Vulkan into these nice, neat classes, that's not really true. So this is just this is one example of how much code it takes to do anything in Vulkan, and it never goes away. So one of the things you hear a lot is this term boilerplate. And to me, boilerplate implies that this is 1,000 lines of open source code that you just copy and paste into your project, and then you can start using Vulkan like a normal API, and that's not true at all. Anyone saying this is either lying to you or they don't know what they're talking about, because that's not the case at all. You can't really. It's very difficult to wrap Vulkan up into these nice, neat classes so that you can use it like a normal API, because the design is extremely convoluted. Like, for example, I think pipelines, I haven't worked with pipelines for a while, but I think pipelines reference, they have to include, like, when they're created, they have to include the Vulkan equivalent of a frame buffer object. And they only work with that one when they're created. And so you have to pre-allocate everything in advance. And I mean, it's just so incredible. It's this intricate web of interconnected parts. So it makes it almost impossible to wrap that up. This code is actually from a command that is sort of a wrapper that it's basically is my version of GL blit buffer. So that might not be the greatest example, but it's easy to understand. But yeah, it's extremely interconnected and interwoven. In fact, and I think Kronos knows that they messed up, and that's why we have all these extensions to remove and replace major aspects of the API. Render passes, those were always stupid. They could provide an advantage on some mobile graphics chips, but they provide absolutely no advantage on discrete GPUs, like for the PC, as I understand it. Frame buffer, the Vulkan equivalent to a frame buffer, I forget what it's called. And then pipelines were replaced with dynamic shader objects. And I know that they weren't replaced. These are extensions. You don't have to use them. But, that's just, calling something, another word. Yeah, these are major aspects of the whole design of Vulkan that were just basically ripped out and replaced. They're still there, of course. Yes, I know it's an extension, but same thing. So when they say boilerplate, they're trying to convince you that Vulkan development is a fixed cost. It's something that you do once, and then you get up to speed, and then okay. But no, it's a variable cost, and I would estimate that using Vulkan, it probably slows things down or makes things more expensive by about a factor of about 5. I'd say it takes about 5 times longer to do anything with Vulkan than it does to do with OpenGL or DirectX 11. So I get to put my MBA to good use now. This is in economics. You have fixed costs and variable costs. Your fixed cost is something like the price of your computer. That's something, for the most part, it's something you just buy once and then you use it forever or for a long time. It's a fixed cost. Variable cost is like development time is a variable cost. And when they say boilerplate, they're implying that Vulkan development is this fixed cost that you do once and then it's done. But instead, it's a variable cost on top of it increases your variable cost. So your total cost keeps going up and up and up and up. It's not just a one-time investment. It is a permanent reduction of your productivity by a factor of about 5 times. It's tedious. This is like AI's interpretation of my description of what Vulkan development is like. I mean, it really is like I've got both my hands tied and I'm like trying to type the keyboard, with a pen in my mouth. Actually, if I was doing that with OpenGL, I might still be more efficient than if I was doing that if I had both hands and was writing Vulkan code. I cannot overstate just what a time sink Vulkan is. And it actually reminds me of, it's sort of like the API equivalent of the, if you remember the show, if you saw this, the show Silicon Valley, this is sort of the interface that the engineers came up with. And that show was actually like pretty good at explaining complicated ideas in a visual and funny way. But this is sort of what engineers produce when they're not when you don't have some kind of like Steve Jobs type person who looks at things from the end user perspective and keeps them in line. Okay, moving on. So it's expensive. It's slow and expensive. But Vulkan is also what really like. Vulkan is unreliable. And we've seen so many examples of this. And, I don't care if it's the driver. I don't care if it's the application. Somebody's going to say like, oh, that's not Vulkan's fault. That's the driver. It's all Vulkan. If you use Vulkan, you get these results. Klepto's PPR generator crashes on Windows 11. We just saw the Unity Vulkan builds of our benchmarks, which were compiled like 2 years ago. Those will crash. Those will outright crash the current AMD graphics drivers. That issue, I'm sure it's probably been solved in the last 2 years, but we never. I mean, I have OpenGL code from like 15 years ago that still runs perfectly on new drivers. We never see these problems with DirectX. We never see these problems with OpenGL. This is a problem that's unique to Vulkan. This is another really bad thing, is that if your graphics card takes more than 2 seconds to do anything, Vulkan is going to produce a device lost error. There is a setting in Windows you can set to extend this time limit, but why do we even have to deal with this? We never had to deal with this before, and Yeah, somebody's going to say, "Oh, well, that's not Vulkan, that's Windows." Okay, it doesn't matter. This is if you use Vulkan, this is the result you get. And this is something that can happen. This does happen with some of the PBR generation shaders because they use a lot of samples in order to produce that blurry, diffuse cube map reflection. So with the OpenGL build, I just crank the samples up to like 1,000 because I no longer have to worry about this issue. Valve, their OpenVR code produces validation errors. This is a known thing. It's not just me. This is in GitHub that other people have experienced. In fact, I had to disable, in the debug build, I had to disable validation errors. I had to disable the callback before calling some OpenVR commands because just in order to not, because there was no way to get it to not produce these validation errors. So, I mean, Valve has been a huge proponent of Vulkan, and they can't even write working Vulkan code. It's incredibly difficult to determine. If you do have a driver bug, it's very difficult to determine where the bug is. With other APIs, it's very easy to see. It's either on the API on the application side, or it's on the driver side. And you guys experience the same thing with when you're working with me. Like a lot of times, what we're trying to do is determine, is it a mistake that you made in your code, or is it actually a mistake in the engine? Well, the same, I deal with the same thing when I'm talking to AMD and Nvidia and Intel. I have to determine whether it actually is a bug in their driver or whether it's a bug in my code. And with Vulkan, it just makes that communication so much more difficult because the interface between the application and the driver is so incredibly convoluted. It's absolutely impossible to recreate simple examples to report driver bugs, which I can do that pretty easily with OpenGL. I cannot do that with Vulkan. Simply, it is impossible because time is not infinite. Vulkan is missing features that we enjoy using in OpenGL. Uniforms are incredibly convenient to work with. I know they don't scale well, but these are things that you usually just set once and then forget about it. So, it's an example of optimizing something that does not need to be optimized and then having all of these horrible repercussions in the user experience because you optimized something that didn't need to be optimized. Vulkan does not support 1x multi-sample textures. So multi-sample textures, that's actually why we never had MSAA. Okay, so multi-sample textures are a little bit different from normal 2D textures. They have to be declared differently in the shader, and they only work with texel fetch instead of normal like texture sampling. Vulkan supports 2x, 4x, 8x, 16x MSAA textures, but unlike OpenGL, they don't support 1x. Why? Because multiple means more than one. Well, what that means is we have to have a separate copy of all of our post-processing effects to work with a 2D or a rectangle texture, and then another one to work with MSAA textures. And it's just this incredibly stupid and pedantic attitude that the API is designed with. I mean, this is something that could be solved so simply, and it would be so trivial to add that in the driver. And instead, they don't, and it has these repercussions for the end user experience, which means, it just makes, post-processing effects that much harder to develop. And this in and of itself is not an absolute deal breaker. But this is just a really good example of what you find littered across the entire API. It's just death by 1,000 cuts. And then for some reason, Vulkan completely lacks bindless textures, which again, these are like one of the most important things from the last decade. This is the reason that you have to predefine the maximum number of textures that that your application might use. And you have to, if you change that, if you want to increase that limit, which some people have hit that limit, then you have to actually you have to modify that value in the shaders and recompile a new copy of the shaders that all use that same storage buffer size. In OpenGL, we have real bindless textures, so we basically can just access them with a 64-bit pointer, which is really, really wonderful. OpenGL 4.6 has much lower, does the exact same thing as Vulkan, and it has much lower system requirements. Actually, like any fallback that I have to write is just going to be basically removing the bindless textures because those are an optional extension. But OpenGL 4.6 is actually supported by like everything from at least the last 10 years. The system requirements are really, really low. Like the GeForce 400 line, the AMD Radeon 5000 line, Intel Graphics 500 series. And, I haven't thought much about support for low-end hardware in Ultra because our PBR shaders are more expensive than the Blendfong lighting in LEDWorks. But AMD's FSR might actually be something that we can put to good use here. I've investigated it a little bit, and I've looked at it. Like, so far, it looks pretty good. I'm not going to know for sure. I'm not going to have a conclusion on it until I actually implement it and have screenshots that I can compare and performance benchmarks. But this might actually be something that targets the weakness of these low-end systems, because these systems, this low-end hardware is going to bottleneck pretty badly in the pixel shader. But FSR is actually something that can totally, theoretically, might actually totally compensate for that. So it might actually give us like way better performance on low-end systems and a lot more backwards compatibility than I was actually planning on. It's inconclusive right now, but it does look pretty good. Let's look at last week's performance benchmarks. Now that you know like the underlying technology. This on the left is Unity's performance. This is Ultra with Vulkan. And this is Ultra with OpenGL 4.6. Unity, by the way, was one of the contributing authors, I believe, in the original Vulkan spec. And we're outperforming them by 10 times with Vulkan. We're outperforming them by 25 times with OpenGL 4.6. So make of that what you will. Now I also looked at, yesterday I looked at GPU utilization. I usually look at GPU utilization more than frame rate because frame rate, that fluctuates with, depending on the hardware. But the GPU utilization, if that's high on one card, then you know it's good everywhere. Actually, I usually do this by sound because I can just hear that coil whine. You know, when you hear a brand new card and it's like making a high-pitched whine that like, sounds like it's going to hurt a dog's ears. When the dogs in the neighborhood start barking, I know my engine is performing correctly. But in this case, this was a little bit confusing to me because OpenGL had a slight edge on Vulkan. And I know small differences in GPU utilization can lead to big differences in frame rate. But this seems disproportionate. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't think I hit some secret slow path in Vulkan. I really doubt that. But that is interesting. But everybody says Vulkan is faster. Well, no, it's not. Sometimes it is. Well, first of all, most games are going from DirectX 11 to Vulkan. OpenGL has always been faster than DirectX. Everybody knows that. DirectX has a lot of overhead for the draw calls. OpenGL does not. That's one of the reasons I like it. Actually, the one case I've ever seen, where a company actually did go from OpenGL to Vulkan and did see a significant performance increase was Doom. And this is one of the things, if it wasn't for this game, I probably never would have gotten into Vulkan in the first place. So I did my own performance testing because at this point I don't trust what anybody else says unless I see it with my own eyes. And so I did some testing on an AMD 6600. I found that with their OpenGL 4.5 renderer was getting 73% GPU utilization, which is quite low. The Vulkan renderer, the frame rate went up to 200, but it's capped at that. It won't go any higher than that. Their GPU utilization was 64% with Vulkan, but that's meaningless because the frame rate was capped at 200. So I don't think we can really make any conclusion on those numbers on the GPU usage. So they did see a significant increase. I like to test with all the settings to low because what I'm testing here is the interface between the application and the driver and the GPU, not the once things get over to the GPU, if you have a lot of post-processing effects cranked up, then that's where things tend to even out more. So I always test with all settings on low. So I'm not sure what to make of this. Vulkan, it looks like Vulkan can be faster in some situations. I think their GPU usage was abnormally low, though. I guarantee you ours would be higher with this. My working theory right now is that Vulkan drivers are overall slower, like pound for pound, but they have multi-threading features that if your application is CPU limited, it allows you to spread that load over multiple CPU threads and reduce it, and that's how you get a faster frame rate. But if you already have very fast, already have very high GPU utilization, like here in our animation benchmark, OpenGL has got 99% GPU utilization. Same with lighting. That's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. If you have that, then you're not going to get the Vulkan isn't going to do anything for you because all it does is allow you to spread that load over multiple threads. That's my working theory right now. I don't know for sure. And I'm kind of tired of investigating this because all I know is when our same renderer, running the same shaders actually, when we put OpenGL 4.6 in as the backend, the performance increased 2.5 times. So good for id Software. It seems like they're doing well with it, but I'd say it's anything but conclusive right now. Well, isn't OpenGL a legacy API? Isn't it going to be obsolescent? Isn't it deprecated on Mac? You're going to get left behind. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that goes along these lines, and it worked on me because I'm always paranoid about what changes might happen in the future, and I want to be prepared for that. So I assumed that Vulkan was really taking off, but I wanted to, I've said before, I like to make database decisions, and so I wanted to see what is the actual rate of adoption for Vulkan. What's actually going on? I mean, I know every time there's a game starts using Vulkan, it's a big news story, and it sounds like there's a lot. But what are the actual numbers? Can we get any data on this? So before we start this, let's imagine it's 2015, and you're at the GDC. I think I was at the GDC this year. I think I was actually across the street when this was going on, but I wasn't in this session. And you're at the GDC 2015 when Vulkan is first announced. I know some of these people. I don't want to turn this into a personal attack. They're all very smart and cool and nice. But you're in this conference room, and they're announcing Vulkan. And you raise your hand and stand up and say, "Excuse me, I'm actually from the future. I'm from the year 2024. And I can tell you exactly how everything played out." They're going to say, for some reason, they believe you, and they're going to say, wow, that's amazing. We're so glad you're here. We have this new graphics API. We think we're finally going to beat DirectX with this. This is going to be the thing that finally, makes, cross-platform, open source. We're going to win with this. Here's the state of the industry in 2015, I'd like to remind you. DirectX was the number one API in usage. But OpenGL was a very strong underdog. I mean, it had like 60% as many games as DirectX. It was the underdog, but it was a strong competitor. And it also had all of mobile. This is 2015, so of course there were 0 Vulkan games because Vulkan didn't exist yet. Well, now we're in the future. Now we're in 2024. And we can see the effect that Vulkan had. We can see how this all played out. And here's how it started. Here's how it's going. These numbers come from PCGamingWiki.com. I don't know exactly what their criteria is for including games in this list. I think it's games with major publishers. So there's certainly a lot of indie stuff that probably isn't included. But I don't think that really matters because whatever, in like accounting and statistics, it doesn't actually matter so much what your actual numbers are. It just matters that they were all collected using the same methodology, because whatever criteria might skew things in one direction for one category is also going to affect all the other categories simultaneously. So this might not be a comprehensive list, but this is the data I was able to find. If somebody can find other data, I'm certainly willing to look at this. But yeah, when I found that, when I started like plotting this out, I was like, oh crap, I did not know this. So it's 2015 again, and you're at the GDC, and they say, wow, that's so amazing. We're so glad you're here. Tell us, did Vulkan finally beat DirectX? Well, not exactly. Okay, so we didn't beat DirectX, but how much did we increase our market share by? Like, OpenGL was making about 60% as many games as DirectX. Surely, like, how much did Vulkan increase that by? You're not gonna like this. Wait, so our market share stayed the same? No. Wait. So, I mean, you're saying it went down? Okay, so you're saying like between OpenGL and Vulkan, now we have 60% of the market. Not exactly. Wait. Okay, level with us. What's actually going on? And you say, okay, well, I'm from the future. And in the future, Vulkan and OpenGL combined make up 10% of games. That room would go silent. Let's look at Vulkan adoption over time, because I assumed that it would be like this gradual slope, like starting slow at first and then ramping up towards the end, because you hear a lot of news stories about it and it sounds like it's if you just listen to that, you would think it was very popular. I thought that it would look like this before I started this process, before I started researching this. Here's what the actual numbers look like. Again, coming from PCGamingWiki.com, we see this spike in, near the beginning because a lot of games wanted to get in, to that marketing buzz, early on, which makes sense. And then the whole industry sort of, caught up, at this point. This is actually about the time when I started working with Vulkan. And then we see this decline, this really pretty steep decline. This is a bad graph. If it was going to take off, you would see like this hockey stick right here. Instead, what we see is that that wave has crested, and that is very clear decline. Here's the same chart with a different data set. I don't know all the details of how this was collected, but The curve looks a little bit different, but we do see the same features. We see this spike in 2017, and then the industry catches on, and then very clearly we see this severe decline over 4 years. That is a bad chart. And anybody, I think Kronos has seen these numbers or something similar to that. And that's why we have these extensions to revamp major aspects of the API. That's why we see all these like helper libraries like Easy, Vulkan, and Nvidia recently. I think they came out with their own. Although Nvidia it was pretty clear from the start. Like Nvidia always thought this was a bad idea. They've always been favorable towards Vulkan. So this is the reality. You're going. So if anybody says you're going to get left behind, just remember this is reality. Again, I don't make a lot of decisions based on what everyone else is doing. But when we have this very strong like fear campaign telling us that Vulkan is the future, Vulkan is inevitable, you're going to get left behind. Well, no, not really. The whole industry has looked at it and said, no, thank you, we're going with DirectX. In fact, Vulkan is the best thing that ever happened to DirectX because it killed off a very strong competitor in terms of market share. In fact, if you want to get a perspective on how bad things are, there were 4 times more games released using 3DFX Glide for the old Voodoo cards in 1999 than there were Vulkan games in 2023. Now, if you had said that, if you were back in 2015 and you raised your hand during that conference and you said, actually, I'm from the future, and in the year 2023, Vulkan will have 25% as many games as 3DFX Glide had in 1999, the whole room would have erupted into laughter. But, this is reality. The list of Vulkan exclusive games is very small because it's usually something that gets added on as like an extra feature that it's an extra option. The number of companies that rely exclusively on Vulkan is very small. This is a list of everything that I could find. There might be more, but I asked some Vulkan people, and this is the list. They gave me some of these. And then I found a few more. id Software has done well with it, but it's usually like an extra option. They're usually not relying on it exclusively. There's a story that Starfield was developed using Vulkan, and then they were getting ready for release, and they realized their renderer was really buggy, so they hired AMD to fix their Vulkan renderer. And instead, AMD just went in and said, "Okay, we're just going to replace this with GX12." I don't know, it's kind of a rumor. You can look it up yourself if you want, but if that is the case, that would not surprise me, and that means that AMD doesn't even want to deal with their own API anymore. Again, don't make too much of that because I don't know for sure if that's true, but. It is. Why is there a horse outside? There's a horse on the street going by. Okay. Yeah, this is not a neighborhood where you normally see horses. Okay, so my point is we're being hit disproportionately hard by this because we went all in on Vulkan. We only support Vulkan. And the number of companies that are doing that is very small. Here's a list of Vulkan exclusive game engines. There's Ultra. I don't know anybody else who's exclusive to Vulkan. And I went hard on Vulkan, and that's why we're getting hit so hard by all of these issues. So Vulkan was supposed to be the chosen one. I believed in it. But as I've laid out, there's just so many issues with it. It doesn't matter if it's a driver. It doesn't matter if it's, what the cause is. If it's some Windows thing, it's all Vulkan. So Vulkan is not the future. The future is fragmentation, extreme fragmentation. We have 5 major graphics APIs, DX11, DX12, which are completely separate things, Metal, Vulkan, OpenGL, and then we have this rise of abstraction layers. Molten VK was the first major one that I heard of, which is Vulkan through in Metal. Valve Proton is DirectX in Vulkan. WebGPU is, I don't even know what that is. It's some web thing that replaces Google's Angle, which is almost native graphics library engine, which is like everything and everything else. It's just Angle. I don't think they have a logo for it. In the time I think just in the last month, Apple released Game Porting Toolkit, which is DirectX in Metal. Intermediate graphics library. This is something from Facebook. Same idea. So basically, this led to this situation, and this caused this to form. And this is the future that George Orwell warned us about in the book 1984. He said, "If you want a vision of the future, dear Winston, imagine a graphics abstraction layer, wrapped in another graphics abstraction layer, wrapped in another one, forever." He's a very smart man. Doom Ron Paul. So it actually didn't have to end like this. There was another way. In 2014, Kronos Group gave a talk that didn't get much attention at the time. It was called OpenGL Efficiency Approaching Zero Driver Overhead. And in this talk, they laid out a strategy to basically minimize the CPU overhead of a renderer. And this is a multi-threading model for OpenGL. Basically, the way I do things is a little bit different. I think my approach is better, but same basic idea. And the results they were getting were 5 to 15 times faster performance. What's that number between 5 and 15? Oh, that's 10x. Who does that remind you of? Yeah, we're using a similar strategy, not exactly the same. And we are getting, that's where we're getting that 10x increase in performance. This was overshadowed by the announcement of Vulkan, and of course, that's how we got here. So, going back to OpenGL in Ultra 0.9.5, this is backwards and forwards compatible in a way that, far more backwards compatibility than I was expecting to. I had no idea OpenGL 4.6 went back. I had no idea support went back so far. I didn't know this either. OpenGL 4.1 still runs natively on new Macs, Apple Silicon included, in 2024. I'm sure they would like to kill off OpenGL, but they just can't. It still actually works. On Windows and Linux, of course, 4.6 runs on everything from the last decade. OpenGL works with Meta VR. There's an implementation of AMD's FSR for OpenGL. And this I just found out a few days ago. You can actually do ray tracing with OpenGL. There is some support for interoperability between Vulkan and OpenGL, so you can use Vulkan for the ray tracing stuff and then make it talk to OpenGL. And I'm sure there's some hoops to jump through to make that happen. But that's, if we can just compartmentalize Vulkan into the things we only need it for, which is future ray tracing support, and not allow it to infect the rest of our software, then that's an acceptable solution to me. So, one of the lessons here is that just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's worth doing. I don't know who this person is. I just found this quote, and it's something that I think is appropriate here. This is also something that's good for you guys to keep in mind. As a developer, like it's important not to get caught up in really obscure things that don't actually add any value to the end user experience. Just always ask yourself, always be critical of how you're spending your time, and ask yourself, is the end user actually going to see any substantial difference as a result of this thing that I'm taking on? Because it is easy to I think for most people this is just intuitive. They don't have to have it explained to them, but for me, like, this is actually like something that I have to remind myself, because I tend to thrive under adversity. Like if there's a challenge, my response is, well, we're just going to try harder. But it's important don't do stupid things. And Jackie Chan told us, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. I think he said that in Beverly Hills Cop 2. And then finally, this is my artistic interpretation of the development process, what it's like to develop with Vulkan versus OpenGL. With Vulkan, it actually is like I've got both hands tied. With OpenGL, I type so fast the keyboard catches on fire. OpenGL allows me to prototype it allows me to experiment with new ideas very quickly. So I actually end up with way better algorithm design with OpenGL, because I can just try things out with Vulkan that I would never get to with Vulkan. And I usually wear sunglasses when I write code, and I also wear a sport jacket with no shirt on, just because the keyboard gets so hot because my fingers are moving so quickly. Okay, so anyways, continuing Ultra development, what we can look forward to is rapid development. I'm getting my superpowers back. I used to be so fast, and I am a much better developer now than I used to be, but Vulkan has really like had my hands tied. Now I can do things very quickly. This is really great. Like I said, I think Vulkan is about 5 times slower to do anything with. So that means, the next 3 months worth of development, I'm gonna accomplish in 3 months what would have taken us at least a year to do otherwise. So things are gonna speed up. That's why I've been saying, like, don't worry, guys, things are gonna get faster. That means more features more quickly. As a side effect, we also are going to get more support for more hardware. It won't run on Intel integrated graphics right now, and some of the low end stuff without support for bineless textures, but I'm most of the way there to making that happen. And with Vulkan, this is just never going to get done. Like a year from now, I'll still be fiddling around with like some obscure like driver setting and trying to figure out why things are crashing. And yeah, OpenGL, we've seen like not just user error, like developer error, but the whole ecosystem is just way more stable. You're not going to have that horrible timeout after 2 seconds, and yeah. So that's all I got.
Ooh, quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I laid everything out pretty clearly, so there's probably no questions. Just
Well,
kidding.
I don't know. Like going from the Vulkan render to the OpenGL render, I did notice like some differences between the two. They're like very minor. I haven't really got much time to play with it because I was more worried about like seeing if my like template project would still work. And although there's still quite work to do to get it back to where the engine was, I think this is a huge step forward because now more people can play my game than they could. And so we just gotta get it back to where it was, and then we can add the vegetation and the particles and the decals and all that. So really cool stuff.
One thing I did notice is that you were talking about FSR or super sampling. I didn't know because I know the specs specifically with the comparison between DLSS and FSR. I know FSR is more open source to a degree. It's obviously Chronos, but the consideration of the possibility for DLSS in the future, even though the comparison between the two is very minuscule.
I'm likely to avoid vendor specific features, but it's I don't know if DLSS works with OpenGL either. FSR, I have a pretty good impression of it. I don't have a final conclusion on it yet. It's using temporal reprojection. Temporal effects can be very, very powerful because it allows you to sort of collate the last few frames and use those to good use. I can't. I don't have any answer on DLSS support right now.
I mean, DLS is kind of bad because only a certain amount of graphic cards can use it. So, for example, I got a Series 3 Nvidia graphic cards, and I can't use DLSS with the new series, like the frame generation or anything else. It kind of sucks, to be honest.
The 3000 series?
Yeah, you can't
Really?
use frame generation. You can only use the upscaling, but not the frame generation.
Oh,
You need a 4000 for this.
yeah.
I haven't
Okay, go
had
ahead.
any luck. No, I haven't any luck with frame generation. Actually, I actually get lower frames per second when I have that on anyway. So
I've heard that and it makes sense that would increase your latency quite a bit. I haven't tried it myself though. And the FSR stuff, the upscaling in general, that is something that's going to disproportionately benefit low end hardware. I think, because that's always going to be the bottleneck for your for the older graphics cards. It's always going to be the pixel shader.
When we talk about older graphics, you said that not integrated graphics are not supported yet. But do you try to support this also?
Yeah, why not? Intel's. Already found a bug in Intel's driver, so I'll have. I mean, at least I'm making progress though with that. Uh, yeah, it should. I mean, integrated graphics going back quite a long ways should support. Should support OpenGL 4.6. All I have to do is write a rendering pathway that does not use bindless textures, and I already had to do this with terrain, so most of the stuff is there. And I did this in anticipation. If you look in the shader families, there's a section for float, or there's a section for static and a section for dynamic. And what that means is static and dynamic lists of samplers. Right now, only the static set is used, but the dynamic set is used. Is intended for use with. It was originally intended for use with graphics cards that did not have a very large limit for how many samplers you could put in an array, and that translates directly to bindless textures. A little bit different in OpenGL, but yeah, that's the limitation right there. The question is, does the hardware support the bindless textures extension? That is the difference between low end hardware, and that's the only difference between low end and high end.
And a final question is I have noted that there is a considerable amount of people on the Discord versus on the forum, but I can't state for that from the forum. And the consideration would be to have some sort of feature request or for a bug request or something of the sort to be considered to be on the Discord, considering the amount of people on it.
No, because it'll never get looked at. I won't look at it.
That's
So yeah, I mean, to be perfectly blunt, So the bug reports, especially when it's on the forum, what I do is I select, like, there's filters there, and I select like the unsolved issues. So I just see a list of everything that hasn't been solved, and then I go through and I mark them. If something is marked as solved, then it usually means that I won't look at it again. So if it does seem like something, gets, if you write a reply on a solved issue and it gets ignored, then you might need to like bring that to my attention. But it's my way of organizing things, and also, you need to assume that Discord can delete our server at any time, and I would have absolutely no, would not have a leg to stand on. They can delete all of our data at any moment for any reason, for no reason at all. I'm not going to put all of our critical information in their hands. I mean, we'll use it because people like it, and it is convenient. But I would not give them something that's critical.
Speaking of unsolved but not solved problems, I'm having a lot of issues with the interface with the new renderer. Like, my console window now no longer works, but that might be because of the window management issue that's going on.
If you're rendering to a texture buffer, make sure that you're specifying that the number of samples should be 0.
No, it's just, you have the project that sends it to you like weeks ago. It's
Okay.
just a little context. It's just a little like panel with a text area, a text box, and a button.
Okay.
And I show and hide it with a camera, and I just show and hide it with and I just show and hide the camera. But it was working, and then it was working kind of, and then I updated the engine, and now it doesn't work anymore. But I think that's because the window pointer is not being reassigned, because I have a splash window, and then I opened the graphics window, and that I mentioned it in the post, but it's not like managing that memory. And then when I go full screen, my small window is still being saved, and then I get a big window, but I get a new frame buffer kind of thing. So I understand you said that you have to like look at it and treat it with care, but
Yeah.
that's I had a perfect good demo demonstrating all the things I need to do, and then this update kind of just like took a brick to it. So
Okay. Well, yeah, the editor wasn't working at all like 4 days ago.
yeah.
And then I was able to solve all those issues very, very quickly. So I wouldn't be too worried. We'll start with like simpler examples and make sure those are working, which we have plenty of those from the documentation. So are you specifically referring to the window bug report that Drake Black created, or is this another one?
Yeah, I think my issue, because he's trying to destroy window and recreate it for full screen
Okay.
mode, and that's what I do. But I have other things going on, and I actually have an event. I actually tell every time I create and destroy window, I call the window paint event, and I give it the new dimensions of the window. This way, I can resize my UI elements. So I can say, okay, this is supposed to be in the bottom right corner. So when a new window creates, all the HUD scales correctly and goes wherever it wants to be. So
Okay.
I'm seeing like similar prompts. So I'm just gonna piggyback off his bug report,
Okay.
because I think it's the same issue.
Yeah. Well, the handcuffs are off now, so I can actually get work done.
And so, yeah. So right now, I kind of just want my app to work exactly how it worked in Vulkan, so I can get back to work.
All right, let's make it happen.
Yep.
Kind of unrelated to your talk, but I've been really thinking about this a lot. Have you considered adding light mapping functions or a way to import light maps or light mapped levels into Ultra Engine?
We have a second texture coordinate set in the vertex layout that was designed for this with this in mind. What are you talking, like completely static lighting, or
Completely
like GI, or is it like a GI component to the lighting?
just static lighting, just static shadows, static GI lighting, whatnot. I asked this because I've been recently messing around with the Light Mapper add-on for Blender,
Mm-hmm.
and the results I've been getting from that look really, really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible to discard the direct lighting in that and only consider the indirect? Is that a feature that they have?
That is a feature, but I also really like the direct lighting
Okay.
in it as well because it has cool lighting effects like Baramba and whatnot.
How would you handle the lighting of like an object that's moving around the scene then?
Just use the regular lighting engine, I think.
But it won't cast shadows because the shadows won't be received by the static geometry. By the light mapped geometry won't show a shadow on that.
Hmm. Well, I was just kind of thinking we have a combination of light mapped for just regular static geometry and regular just dynamic lighting for like moving stuff.
Yeah, you
It'll
could. So, like, objects would cast a shadow onto the moving object, but the moving object would not cast a shadow onto the light map surface. You could use throw some SSAO in there, and it might look good. But that's one consideration. I'm not saying no. I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Well, it would fix any shadow banding because that's something I've seen in the new render. There's more shadow banding. There's better filtering than Leadworks ever did, but you can still like see it. So
Yeah.
light maps can actually fix this, and it could probably save on performance or battery life when you.
It certainly would for especially for low end systems, and
Well, I'm thinking
until
about like the Meta Quest and everything.
yeah. Yeah, I'm open to it. I'm just asking you a lot of questions because I want to know, like, how do you see this detail playing out? Yeah, I'm open to it.
All right. There was another thing I wanted to ask as well. Around a year ago, you posted to the SCP Containment Breach subreddit,
What
wondering
did
if
I
people
say?
would be
Oh God,
interested.
what did I say?
You were interested.
Oh,
You said you were
okay.
the author of 3D World Studio, and the SCP Containment Breach community uses 3D World Studio to make levels and whatnot for that game. And you asked if anyone would be interested in a newer, updated version of 3D World Studio for SCP Containment Breach or other games.
I did say that, didn't I? Are you from SCP?
No, but I'm just generally interested in that stuff because I'm interested in old engines like Blitz 3D, Dark Basic Professional, stuff like that.
All right, I'll tell you. All right, I guess I haven't said anything about it, but one of my ideas is to take the editor and release like a free version of it for use with for modding for other games. That's actually like where I actually got started was from Quake modding, and that's my background. And that's actually like Reap Blue here. He came from like Portal modding, I think.
Yep.
And I think there might be some untapped like benefit for like modding and indie game development for some reason are two different worlds, and I'm not sure why. I think it would be kind of cool to put a what I would do is the first thing I would do is I would release this free editor for use with the game Quake. That's actually why I did all those Quake plugins. It was also just a way to test out the flexibility of the plugin system because the Quake file formats are so weird and non-standard because they came before 3D hardware acceleration for 3D was really a thing. And SCP was another one thing that I was looking at that we might be able to support with that. I was considering it, and so when I was posting about that, I was just kind of like putting that idea, I was kind of like, getting an idea, trying to gauge how much interest there would actually be. So that's what was behind that. Maybe it will happen.
I think something like that would be really useful for game developers that use either an engine that doesn't really have good mapping tools or an engine that just doesn't have a 3D interface at all, like simple Dark Basic, App Game Kit, Raylib, whatnot,
Well,
Armory 3D.
well, Gunman, I actually want it for my game because that's where my roots are, and I think and I have a single player game, so new maps, new content is actually critical. So people keep playing with it. It's not a multiplayer game, so that's why people come back to single player games. They want to play mods and break the engine. And the modding community is actually more enthusiastic and more creative than like indie developers because they
have
hyped
really
up
good
teenagers.
artists.
Well, they just hyped up teenagers that want to make something cool. They're not worried about business sense. They're not worried about how many units to sell or anything. They just want to be like, they just want street cred at that point. They want to make the coolest thing and have like the biggest street cred. So that's why you see most innovation and like craziness in there. And that's great.
This would be really cool, to be honest. Some editor for modding. That you can just create some map files.
Yeah. So
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will go ahead. So and there's actually like two strategic things here. One is that it's a way to give away a free version of the engine without making the engine free, because people who would start using that and then they find that they like the workflow of the editor. A lot of those people will become customers, but they were unlikely to be customers anyways. I worry a lot about doing a free version because you're just cannibalizing your own sales. And then the other issue, the other opportunity is that game editors usually suck, even for like AAA games. And there might, maybe in the future there will be the opportunity to actually license that editor out to companies and allow them to distribute like their own branded version of it, which is basically the same idea as what Discrete did with Gmax. If anybody remembers that, it was like a stripped down version of 3D Studio Max that they licensed to companies to distribute as a modding tool for their game. That's basically the idea.
Well, I was just thinking that having just a general purpose 3D editor for engines that don't have a 3D editor would be very good.
But then
I personally like to have something like that for something like App Game Kit or whatnot, or Godot, because a lot of people in the Godot community have recently come up to like Trench Broom and whatnot to use that for just general purpose level design or level geometry making.
Yeah, I hate the Godot editor for 3D. I don't know how I use it.
Why should Josh sell his editor gift his editor for other engines? I mean, it makes absolutely no sense.
Well, I'm saying like
business terms.
Well, if it's for Quake, then you can't really get data out of that. You can't really get, it doesn't support terrain. It doesn't support a lot of things. So I probably would not make an editor for Godot, as I will call it.
Well, not really specifically for Godot, but just a general purpose editor for engines that just don't have one, or people that would prefer to use another editor.
If it was a general purpose tool with, like GLTF export and stuff like that, that would be something that I charge money for. It is a possibility, but the advantage of like, modding is the file formats are usually really weird, so it's not something that like the first version I'm talking about for Quake, that would be licensed only for use with Quake for Quake mods. It would only export Quake formats, so it would be quite limited in what you could get out of it. But yeah, this is something that we can, now that like what I've been, this is one of my ideas I haven't talked about, but this is something we can sort of flesh out and see if it's a good idea over the next year or so.
Yeah, but in modding for mods, so I written a few days ago, I want to make a shooter like Counter-Strike And for this project, editor would be really nice for the community, so they can make map files and nothing more, right?
Yeah, and I've been in discussion
File,
with some people who have games about that exact idea. So if if there was some way where I could provide you with an editor that ships with your game, or an editor that they get separately on Steam that supports your game, then that's a huge benefit to you guys because it makes your game very moddable.
Right.
That's another idea for sure.
And also, like, no one does it anymore, right? Like, a lot of games use third-party proprietary engines, and there's hardly any mod tools, or mods are very discouraged. I mean, even Source Valve stuff, the new Source 2 stuff, is like not what it was 20 years ago.
Or the tools are crippled, like in id Software stuff.
Yeah,
Snap map.
so you're not. So I think like something we can do in the indie scene is revive that energy of modding and let people actually have the tools, the same tools we use, and let them like create and have that energy that the AAA games had. So
Yeah, the moddable AAAs.
yeah, yeah, because again, I wouldn't be here if I didn't mod for Portal and Half-Life and all that. So
What did you guys think of the slideshow?
It was
it was
fun.
it was interesting.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked by this. I did not know this before I started this process. I did not know this. My perception of it was completely different. And then I found this out, and it's like I felt like I was like an investigative journalist, like uncovering like corruption during the Iraq War or something like that.
The only thing is that if you actually did go back to 2015 and say this, they won't believe you. They'll just call you crazy. And
but OpenGL is really old, right? So what is with the future in like 5 years or something? I think that Chrono stopped the development, right? From OpenGL. So OpenGL 4.6 was the last version they released.
Yeah, but they're still releasing. There's still extensions coming out for it. Like they added mesh shaders for it. The only thing it's missing is ray tracing. And we could. I mean, yeah. If you said you're like I'm from the future, and they're gonna say, you know, and I'm here to tell you what the number one graphics API in the year 2023 is DirectX 11. It is. Like DirectX 1. So if we're worried about the future, then we should be using DirectX, but I'm not going to worry about that right now.
But
and it's important that at least OpenGL works today as the same as it worked 5 years ago, and that's more important. Unlike the demos using Vulkan that don't work after 2 months or after a driver update, because that could be really frustrating.
Yeah, it's almost like mobile where your code only exists temporarily. I mean, if you have any like old games you bought like on iPhone, like when 3D on iPhone started, like I have like I bought like id Software's games on iPhone, and now they don't work, of course.
Right.
Vulkan is kind of that's like what we're seeing.
No,
I don't
well,
care.
that's why people like games on Windows, because they have their own dynamic libraries for that version, and everything just works. You don't need like a runtime like you do on Linux or anything. Everything just keeps working.
Yeah. And I know somebody's going to say that's not Vulkan's fault. That's the driver's fault. That's lazy developers. That's Windows. It doesn't matter. It's all Vulkan. If you use Vulkan, that's the result you get.
Right, and at the end of the day, your end customers suffer.
Yeah.
And you suffer.
Yeah. So like all these at this point, if any of these like big companies are encouraging people to go into Vulkan, when I know that they know about this, And if they're still encouraging people to go into Vulkan development, I think that's very objectionable. Because it's like these the tech media that's telling you, oh, you're going to get left behind, you have to use Vulkan. Well, they're not going to be there for you when your game stops working. They're not going to be there for you when somebody's GeForce what is it? Somebody, some guy on Discord. He has a GeForce 2070. I think the issue is that he has a laptop, that he's got like laptop drivers, but our Ultra 0.9.4 won't even initialize on it for on it. Anytime like a big entity is telling you that you need to do something and they're not taking responsibility for the repercussions if it doesn't go well for you, you need to be very wary of that. It's this, these corporate initiatives where, they want a certain outcome, but they want you to take all the risk and the cost, which is considerable. A lot of times, like government agencies or large corporations, like any large organization, they like to push off the responsibility. They like to push responsibility off onto you a lot of times, and you need to be wary of that.
Okay. So, what's the next step going forward? Like, you're just gonna play whack-a-mole with bugs, and once that's all settled, you do like a 9.6, and then start working on new features, or?
Yeah. So I've got. Obviously we're going to have some things to iron out with 0.9.5, but I think it's going to go very quickly. I've got a meeting, not next week, but like Monday, not this coming Monday, but the next Monday after that, the 18th, I think. I've got a meeting with a large organization, and honestly, like I do not want to be the guy who told them that it was a good idea to use Vulkan, because I don't have a high degree of confidence in its continued, in its reliability. I think it'll be around for a long time, but I don't want to be the guy who told them that it was a good idea when things have a high chance of going wrong.
Right.
So I need to do some preparation for that. That's an important meeting. So in order, so what I want to do is, solve, any renderer issues that exist with the new backend, and then prefabs are next on the list, because I think that's the thing that I can do that will have the most impact for your guys' experience in the least amount of time, and then onto the vegetation system, which is going to be pretty much a straight port. And because I'm just copying and pasting OpenGL code, it's going to go so much faster than, I was not looking forward to the prospect of redoing that shit with Vulkan, because everything's just so incredibly tedious.
Right, and then you could just go boom vegetation, boom particles, boom decals, boom this, boom that, and
pretty much. It's like I'm getting my superpowers back. I used to be cool.
Right.
I used to be fast, and Vulkan turned me into a non-developer. Now I'm a developer again.
So pretty much pretty much by the summer, Ultra Engine can have every feature of Leadworks, pretty much.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's very reasonable.
All right, cool. Because I need stuff, and a lot of us need stuff. So
well, the handcuffs have been removed, so, and the Kraken has been released.
Awesome.
I got another question when it comes to the models. I posted in the forum yesterday that there is something weird with the animation.
Yep.
And Spiderpig and me did find a workaround, like you import the FBX and doesn't touch the GLTF anymore, because you won't be able to save the animations from it.
And I still want to solve that issue, though. If there's a GLTF file that is not working, then I want it. Then that is a priority for me, and I'm not ignoring that.
Just that you can save this animation, and maybe I was writing it today in the forum that you actually can re-import an FBX file so that the GLTF gets created new. that you don't need to replace the player, for example, and all the components every time you add a new animation.
Wait, I'm not sure I follow you there.
So at the moment, I use animations from Mixamo, and I just import the FBX files direct into Ultra, because the export from Blender seems not working. And if I import the FBX file directly, you get the animations and everything is fine in the model.
Okay.
But you import it only when you track the file into the engine, right?
So the FBX conversion that happens by it's going through Facebook's FBX to GLTF converter. There is, I believe, there's an option. No. Actually, there's a script extension that runs whenever a new FBX file. I haven't. I'm on the old project. There's a new there's a script extension that detects when an FBX file changes, or and then it runs the converter automatically. And so you're saying that like some data or something is being lost that you.
No, nothing is lost. I just want to have an option to re-import the FBX files to recreate the GLTF from this file.
It should happen automatically whenever the file is overwritten.
Okay, I don't notice that this is getting changed automatically.
Okay, it should. If it's not, then we need to take a look at that. But that's how that's how it's designed.
And some visual that you can actually in the editor attach an entity to a bone, so you can rotate it in the editor and don't need to restart the game 10 times to find the right rotation.
Right. The reason. In Ultra, bones are not treated as entities, and one of the nice things about that is that it greatly reduces the number of nodes that we have in the scene view. Because if we had a node for every single bone, let's say there's 100 bones and you have 1,000 characters, and let's say you have 100 characters in the scene. What does that work out to be? Like 10,000 tree view nodes. I'm not sure if that's if that's an issue or not. I right now it's only supported. Its bone attachment is only supported by code, but I see your point. Maybe that's something. I think maybe we should try it and see like what the impact of that is.
Yeah, some extra editor or something, I don't know, where you can actually attach it and then at least get the values for the rotation, the location, and the scale, that you can just pass it into the code or something. This would really help, because as I said, restarting it 10 times and then figure out, okay, this is too much, and this is the complete wrong direction, is really painful.
So are you talking about rotation of the object that you're attaching?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because from my model, I have in one hand, I will attach it to one hand, that whenever the hand gets moved, the object will also get moved, and
Yeah, I think this is something we need to like. I don't have an answer to that right now, but I think it's something that it is an issue in the pipeline that we do need to come up with an answer for that.
Right. Well, I also want. There's a feature in Leadworks that I couldn't live without, was you make all your animations on one track and then you can cut them up in the editor. I don't know if
that's very, very helpful. The reason it's not supported, I think it might actually be hidden in the code, but it's not exposed. The reason for that is because currently the GLTF saving routine does not include animation.
Right.
It needs to be added. I just haven't had time yet, and animation in GLTF is fairly complicated. I think GLTF, it has some unnecessary complication because it's from Kronos, but they kept it. They were able to restrain themselves for the most part in that time. Yeah, so I mean, GLTF is an example of a technology from Kronos that turned out to be a very good idea. It was a lot of work, but that was worth doing, and I think it provides a very good,
As
some
long
very
as
good tools
better
for you.
than the as long as better than the Vulkan idea from Kronos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my feeling on it. I agree.
So you don't have any regrets implementing it.
Why you don't use a simp for importing models?
I don't trust it. I don't know what it's doing, and if there's a problem, then I won't be able to solve it, and it'll just my issue will be completely ignored.
It's kind of straightforward, to be honest. It's not that complicated. Even I could
Maybe.
handle it. Yeah, even I could handle it to import models with simp.
Don't sell yourself short, man. You're very smart.
No.
Yeah, I wanted complete control over like GLTF. There's some weird stuff. There is some weird stuff in there that I needed to like really understand really really well. But ASAMP might, as it's unfortunately called, it might be a good library. It might be a good option. So
See.
I mean, you would support larger numbers of model files. You even could import direct blend files or something.
I know, but it's like I want to support us. I just want to make sure that we're correctly supporting the. I want to make sure the things that we support are absolutely correctly supported. Yeah, which is OBJ and GLTF. Input and output.
I don't know. I low key miss the MDL file format. I don't know why, but probably because I'm used to it and I know how it works.
Yeah, it's a black box. It is nice for like fast loading, and it is a nice format. But it's I don't miss not being able to convert the files back into load files back into a 3D modeling program.
Right, but if let's say like if you have like all your source files, right? That's not really much of an issue. It's nice in case like something goes wrong, but it's not like it's like a nice to have for people who just download miles of the internet, but it's not like critical if you actually have all the Blender files and all the Photoshop or all the GIMP files. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but people never have the source files. Oh man, so many games like I from the game launcher. There is a way for me to extract those. It's a little bit difficult, but yeah, a lot of people lose their source files. But I don't know.
Mm. Well, I think like something you can consider is just supporting the legacy formats a bit more. But I know there might be some complicated things because it already supports the Ledwork stuff, and if you can just include obviously it has something to do. You have to do stuff with like the collider and everything, but if you can just like just copy and paste the FBX to MDL exe, you know what I mean? Like I don't think it would be hard, but it's just another option.
Oh, yeah. Actually, another issue with that is periodically the FBX file format changes, and periodically I have to contact the person who originally wrote it and ask them to update it. They would not. It was a person who has written a popular 3D program that is used for input and output of a lot of formats, and they did it for me at a reasonable price, but I do not have the source code for the FBX to MDL converter. So that is a point of vulnerability. That is a very strong possible point of failure in the future.
Well, okay, well,
As input solve this problem as well.
You may be right.
Well, you just gotta look at your risk and rewards. I mean, because there's been a lot of like issues with GLTF, and a lot of confusion, and with Leadworks because its focus was ease of use. It was very easy for me to get a model in with animation, and right now I don't know how to get a model with animation in as a GLTF properly. Like it keeps like screwing up.
You just
So,
export the GLTF from Blender or whatever.
well, my issue, I talked to Marcel here. He's in chat. My issue is that I don't know how to properly do it in Blender. Like you have to like bake the animations.
You
Like,
can show it if you want.
well, I need like a written guide because I'm going to like if someone like Marcel or even you, Andy, can just write a guide like how to bake multiple animations and everything. That would be terrific because that's something I struggle with. So, and I only use like Blender like every like 3 to 6 months, so I'm not gonna remember half the things because I don't use it that often.
Yeah, I think
Well,
those
with
animation track tools could be very, very useful. And I think the right way to do it is to, first add GLTF, save animation saving, and then add the animation manipulation tools because those were very useful. And it does seem like we have to do a lot of compensation for 3D modeling programs that seem to be lacking in a lot of areas like texture mapping and animation control.
well, like I said, like in my talk, my Blender talk, you look at Blender tutorials, they talk about like doing like animated scenes and all this. They're not hardly they're made for game development stuff, unless it's like for the popular 2 or 3. So it's very hard to like look up and be like, oh, how do I just animate a GLTF model? And then and it's like a hour long video for something very simple. So
Yeah, and it's also it's concerning to hear this from you because you're the guy who, I mean, you know more than about Blender than most people here.
mhm.
So yeah,
And I don't know
that is
much.
concerning.
There's a lot of like there's a lot I don't know much. There's like a lot of
I think you should focus if you want to make some videos or guides or written guides on the website. You should focus on Blender, not on 3D Max or Maya, because I think the people who are using these programs knows what they do.
right.
And the majority of our people will use Blender, I think, because it's free, and for Autodesk you pay like $1,200 in a year.
Yeah, well,
No, it's they have an indie license actually. It's like $350 a year, which is I think that's I think they're pricing themselves badly. Like they would make. I think that if they offered a $99 per license per year or $199 per year, I think they would actually be making way more money off of indies. But it is $350 a year if you're using it a lot. That is pretty reasonable.
yeah. Well, even like in my talk, I used GIMP, I used Blender, and I said I'm using this so anyone on any platform in any circumstance can follow along. And I think if we're going to do like video tutorials in the future, we should make it the most accessible multi-platform. So when Ultra Engine goes on Linux or Mac OS, they can also install Blender or GIMP and follow along.
Which
can
is going to
also
happen
use-
way sooner now than it would otherwise.
Right.
I can't even imagine like dealing with Vulkan on like on a on an Android OS. I can't even imagine what a nightmare that would probably be.
Or Mac OS on Apple Silicon.
It's like with Molten VK. Like if something goes wrong, um, you've got 3 people arguing about whose fault it is.
Right. Well, Mac OS. See, Mac OS development interests me, but it's like not worth it because you're doing all that work, you're jumping through all those hoops, and your market share is like 0.02%. It's like, yeah, it's cool. It's running on a ARM processor that takes like way less power than typical computer.
Josh, look in the text channels. There is some people who want to ban.
Oh, let's see. Haven't been reading that.
General, the red dot channels.
Oh,
Left.
okay. Hold on. First, let's go through the chat here first. Will OpenGL have any impact on Linux version? I guess not. It's going to make the Linux version, whenever it comes out, it'll be 5 times sooner than it would be otherwise. That's what I can tell you. And it'll probably run faster than it would otherwise. Stona Persona, see you later, dude. Your renderer inside Godot would be a game changer for a lot of people. Yeah, it certainly would.
Yeah. No, they're just spamming the chat. That's all.
Under, you need to scroll down more.
Oh,
There.
that. Okay, so there's actually something we did. I've actually done work in the past combining dynamic shadow maps with static GI, and that produced very good results because you had like the dynamic and the stuff combined. That was very cool. And also, like, it's also possible to do the pure static approach. Are all these people like? Okay, is there anything else I should be looking at?
Yeah, the thing highlighted in yellow.
Yeah.
Oh, I ignored that because it's highlighted in yellow. Free 18 plus content. Oh, what is it? 18 plus teen content. Well, it's legal, right? All right. Wit? Who is this person? Oh, okay, I don't even know what to do. Like, how do I get rid of him?
You go to the name of him and ban him.
You can just right-click him, right-click his name or his profile.
Timeout.
And then
kick or ban?
Ban.
Ban.
They're bot posting porn bots, so.
Oh. Well, they didn't specify what it was. They just said it was content. Sounds pretty generic.
Just porn. Annoying.
Well, you don't know that for sure.
Now you need to go to the Lua and the C++.
No, I think when you ban them, everything goes away.
Oh no, this is only a ping. Okay.
Yeah, everything went away.
Okay, why did they come? Why did we never get that? Why did they come like during this meeting of all times? Anyways, so thank you all for coming today. Are there any other questions?
No, but something that came up is that you probably should get something where you need a forum account to join Discord, but I don't know how that would work. But that would be useful because some people join here and then like, oh, post in the forum and like, I don't want to make an account or something. So it would help with the bot issue, but
yeah, it would be nice, but
I don't think that
is that. Yeah.
Kind of kills discoverability for the Discord. Most people want to jump in and see what's going on before they want to join a forum.
Ultra Engine is actually a private Discord. It's not a community Discord. You know that because it doesn't have the little house icon.
Alternatively, restricting the access of the @everyone feature to just admin people like you would probably help a lot. Or at the very least, make something like this less annoying when it happens.
Oh, did they like? Did that send a notification out to everybody?
Everyone sends a notification to everyone.
Okay, I'll see if I can change that.
All right, but I'm all set then. I don't know what to do because I guess I'm just gonna wait for fixes to get pushed out before I do anything. So
just be yourself.
Yeah, pretty much.
I just wanted to mention it again because I've been thinking about it a little bit more. What I really would like, just like that standalone editor we were talking about before, what I would really like is just an updated version of 3D World Studio. Just a standalone 3D level editor that costs like $30 to $60 that can be used as a just general purpose editor for people who use like frameworks or their own game engine. That'd be really helpful for stuff in like the indie scene. At least I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, and actually that's a lot, if we're using OpenGL for the rendering backend, that actually fits that idea a lot better because one of the concerns I had about this is, well, if we're using Vulkan 1.3, that's that makes the system requirements fairly high for these kind of users.
Higher than the game that's made for.
What's that?
Higher specs for the game it's actually intended to use. All you need like Quake, like low, like anything can run Quake, but only Vulkan 1.3 compatible
Yeah,
computers.
that's a bit contradictory, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I have to say the editor is going the right direction. So we talked, I think, a few weeks, 8 or 9 weeks before when you released the engine. There was a video. He was complaining about the editor, and the editor now is really good, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm
glad you find that.
Still missing things, but we'll get there. These things take time, as Gabe Newell once said.
Yeah. Well, yeah, now things are gonna. Yeah, we had to like take a step back, and now we can take a lot of steps forward a lot more quickly because I'm not dealing with. You guys don't see it, but like I spend so much time dealing with like stupid image layout transitions and all this kind of like extraneous crap. And from my view, like Vulkan is just a super bloated, slow version of OpenGL with bad drivers. That's the reality that I've seen.
Right.
So now things are going to accelerate from here. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. It was very interesting, as always, and I'll see you on the forum.
Yep.
All right. See you later.
Yeah.
Yep, bye.